Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now! Yeah. Uh-huh. Now the jam. Get down and down. Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all up with his name. We're calling the chief. The chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know and what do they call him? We call him the chief. The chief. You're damn right we do. Oh.
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find us on YouTube and generally on Rumble, although I think we're having some problems today, so we might not be on Rumble today. But you can catch us every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we review movies, crime-related movies, cop-related movies with other retired law enforcement, and it's been great fun. We continue doing this. God, I think I'm in my second year, going on my third year here pretty soon. But anyways, this is a lot of fun, and today we're going to review the movie The Order, which is actually based upon some true events. There's some fictionalized stuff in this story, but it is based upon some true events that occurred in the 70s and early 80s. And it's about white supremacists. So it's an interesting story. Most people don't know about it, but I'm kind of a history nerd. I read up on all this stuff. So I was well aware of this, and then I saw the movie. I said, let's do this one. It'll be fun. But before we get into the movie, I did want to remind you folks to check out the Los Angeles Mission. The Los Angeles Mission operates a shelter. I think it's 88 years now. In downtown Los Angeles, where they service the needs of the men and women on Skid Row and the children on Skid Row. And they give them some meals and they give them a warm bed to speak. And it's not necessarily just a shelter for homeless. They do some shelter stuff, but their goals are to provide services, to bring them into the mission, and then convince the people who are struggling but are ready for change to turn their life around. So they have treatment and month-long treatment, 6 to 12 month wraparound services that help to bring people off the street and reintegrate them back in society. And they are faith-based, so they don't get any government money. So they do it just based on donations. They're very successful when somebody does get into the program. And I've talked to some of the folks who have gone through the program, and it's been life-changing for them. Some of them, it's about the religious part of it that helps them change their lives, and other parts it's about just the straight therapy programming that teaches them how to rewire themselves to live their life and reintegrate in society. And it's a tough thing. These guys have been on the street. They're addicted. Many of them have burned the bridges at home. They have no family support, and their family doesn't trust them because they've taken advantage of them for decades. And the LA Mission is one of those way stations to help them rebuild themselves and rebuild their trust. And so check it out. Let's see. Good morning. Hey, I was excited to see this particular film reviewed by the Chief, which was taken from the pages of the Turner Diary. Yes, I was a reporter, editor, and in the early days of the militia movement, and it was nuts. Yes, it is. Astain. Yes, yeah, it was. It's a very interesting story. But most people don't know about it these days because it's old. It's old, but it is very interesting. Yeah. Good morning, lady. And the other thing is I want to remind you guys, you can catch me on Twitter at LSD Jordan. I do post about a wide variety of things. I have been focusing on the Mayor Karen Bass lately, and, just looking at her voting record. And, she's just a hardcore lefty. She had a chance to support the death penalty for people who murdered federal officers or police officers. She refused. She stopped the pipeline that was coming down, the Keystone Pipeline, which guaranteed that all of us would have higher gas fuel costs at the pump. And she's just she also refused to there was an effort to that we would not give Iran back any of its money until it settled the cases against the people victim of terrorism caused by Iran. She voted against that too. So she didn't support the victims of terrorism. She supported Iran over the terrorists or over the victims of terrorism that they sponsored. She's a hardcore lefty. She doesn't look out for you. I think the big one for me is, although this is a law enforcement show, and I'm mad that we can't. She can't even support the death penalty for people who kill cops. But it's this energy cost one that is driving me crazy because it impacts so many people. When fuel costs go up and energy costs go up, the people who can least handle it are the poor and seniors living on fixed incomes. When fuel costs go up by 20 or 30% or 100% over a couple of years, if you're on a fixed income as a senior, your income just doesn't keep up. If you're part of the working poor, your income just doesn't keep up. And I believe that there are people in LA who are choosing between groceries and air conditioning, and we got a heat wave coming. So it just drives me crazy that these leftists are so, they embrace these green policies that clearly are hurting the people on the margins the most, and you can't get them to even address it or even talk about it. They're so focused on their goal of net carbon zero by 2024 in California, no matter who it hurts, which drives me nuts. But hey, we got to get back to doing the fun stuff, and that is reviewing movies here. And I only got one guest today, so let's bring retired Sergeant Danny Coon on to review this movie, The Order. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
I'm good, Chief. Yourself today?
Pretty good. Are you ready for the heat wave that's coming here?
Yes.
You got insulation in your windows, double pane windows. You got the stuff in the attic to help keep it cool in the house, the gable fan and all that other stuff that people like us who have some money can at least try to mitigate, right?
Hey, I'm just a poor, unemployed former county employee trying to scrape together a living for my family. Yes, I have double pane windows.
Yeah, it's
decent insulation.
Yeah, right. I just feel bad for the poor on that one. And then I was just doing research on Karen Bass for my other show, Briefing with the Chief, and she didn't support legislation that would give the death penalty to people who kill cops, right? So she's anti-police and she's anti-everything. She's just a hardcore leftist, and we're going to talk about people on the hardcore right on the order here, but there are the hardcore left that do engage in violence as well, right?
Yeah, yes, there is. And, when you get back to Mayor Bass, you got to remember she set a bomb in the Capitol building many years ago. So she's been an anti-government, anti-everything for many years, and she's just, I don't know how she got elected as mayor over Caruso, but she needs to be go through the whole process again and get voted out of office and get someone new, fresh blood in there that actually supports the citizens of Los Angeles instead of her own political agenda.
Yeah, we do support law enforcement on the show. One of the things that drives me crazy is over the last 10 years, the political leadership, particularly in LA County, LA City, whenever there's protests, they seem to only have recrimination and criticism of the cops. No matter how much violence is being committed by the protesters against the police and the rioting and the looting, you have to understand where they're coming from. Now they seem to have shifted that same language towards the federal authorities, right? Suddenly the local cops are the good guys and the federal authorities are the bad guys, the occupying army, which is what they say about LAPD and the sheriff's department for many years. And these people, they just have like one, it's like, when did the public figure out that these are one-trick ponies? They use lies and misinformation to justify it. Anti-police just means she ain't been in the right handcuffs. Thanks, lady. That's kind of cute. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah. In my neighborhood, I live in a gated community, which is age restricted. In my neighborhood, I live in a very blue county, and there are flags all over the place saying, America can't be great again, and because of hate, or hate doesn't make America great. And it's like, I'm trying to figure out who's hating on who. It's the blue people who tend to go to the blue. They're the ones hating on the cops. They're the ones hating on the federal government. They're the ones hating on everything that is right. And it's the guys in the red states that lean red. They're going, "What are you guys hating for? We're just doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're doing what's right. We're enforcing laws that were made 100 years ago.
Right.
We're not taking people to court every 5 minutes because I think it's going to be a good idea to turn the water off and on the fountain at the White House to save $5. I mean, it's crazy that every time you turn around, this poor guy's being sued for something stupid."
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking about the hardcore left and how they're conducting themselves these days, and it's so visible. And one of the arguments I make, hey, when the protesters show up with helmets, shields, and vests on, and all in black and wearing masks, they're not there for peaceful protests.
Oh, come on! The guy handing out gas masks and face covers at the LA.
They're not there for peaceful protests.
They were just there to protect themselves from what the evil police were shooting at them.
If they and when the cops won't come out, if they'll find some counter demonstrators, they'll attack them. They're not there for peaceful protests. But hey,
exactly.
we're talking about radicals on the left
protest.
Right. Hey, nothing says peaceful protest like shields and face masks and helmets, right? But the order was, there was a time when we had some violent militias rolling around, and I think they still do to some degree, but in the 70s and 80s they seem to be much more prevalent, and there seemed to be a call for violence to a much greater degree back and then. And if you remember correctly, this was a time of high inflation, right, coming out of the Jimmy Carter era, frustration with government. We had started the whole globalization, so you saw manufacturing drop. So there was a lot of things happening, and there was shifting priorities in the country, and people felt like they were being left behind, and they couldn't count on their government. Let's see, the division tactics are calculated and not new. When one plan fails, 3 more are produced. It's funny. It's like you can just see it in the names of the protests. I just love it. 50-51. So this is Indivisible that's pushing all this stuff, right? It's all coordinated. I did a show on them on my other show, Briefing with the Chief, and it's a very wealthy, somebody that comes from a very wealthy family. So the wealthy oligarchs are fighting the other oligarchs, and they're claiming that they're defending democracy. That's what's going on. But yeah, so it's 50-51. So 50 states, 50 capitals on the same day. That's what that meant. And then they switched to no kings. Then they switched to hands off our Medicare. Then they were embracing the no war one, but Trump finished the war quickly. I mean, the war was over with, and they come out with the signs "No War." Well, hey, that was 3 days ago, dude. So they keep printing these signs and keep ramping these protests around the country, and they're already so make up your mind. What do you stand for? Is it just And if you actually read the documents that they produced talking about what their goals are, it's really just disruption. It's not, hey, let me lay out a platform that Americans can get behind. It's disrupting the administration, so there's no victories, even if they agree with what the administration's doing. They don't want to give them any credit, like no tax on tips, no tax on social. Those are things that they should get behind, but they won't give the administration credit because it isn't about policy. It's about control and power. That's what it's about. So it's that's what's going on. But let's talk about the movie. So let me introduce it here, and then I want to get into the actual. I got some pictures regarding the actual true historical stuff. So let's see. The Order was released in 2024. It's a crime thriller film directed by Justin Cruzel and written by Zach Balin. It's based upon a 1979 non-fictional book, The Silent Brotherhood. But it is based upon a true story of some guys on the radical right who decided to go to war against the country and committed a lot of violent acts, mostly gathering kind of operations. What I mean by that is they were gathering resources, money, and trying to build a network of people to actually to fight the U.S. government, basically to rebel. That's probably the right word to say. And these guys were basically in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, although they had some connections to Idaho, which is, we have Idaho in the news right now. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho factored into this, and we had the recent murder of the firefighters up in Coeur d'Alene. And so that's one of the things that brought me, hey, I mean, I should do something about the Order, was the murder of the firefighters up there by some whack job up there. And, that, of course, was thought to be, these were right-wingers doing this. When I was watching the news reports, they talked about all of this stuff. Well, as Coeur d'Alene is known for these right wing this and that, and now it's probably it that was hell, that's 40 years ago that this stuff was going on, and now every moderate Republican that can move out of California is moving out to either Montana or Idaho or Texas. They've loaded up these areas with a lot of mainstream Republicans. You don't have the same radicalization that occurred 40 years ago, but they still talked about it, which actually is what got me focused on the movie. And the FBI focused on taking these guys down because they did get kind of violent, but they did have a charismatic leader, and you'll see him portrayed in the movie. Let's see what the actor that portrays him is. Let's see, it's Nicholas Hoult. He plays as Bob Matthews, is the leader of the order, and Jude Law kind of plays a composite FBI character in this case called Terry Husk that takes him down. But the real Robert Matthews was kind of this really charismatic leader that was it's always amazing to me, Danny, how some guys have such charisma that they can get what you would think is smart people to engage in a conspiracy to do really stupid things, which is I couldn't imagine myself, even if I was a bit of a right winger, joining a militia and doing bank robberies or armored car robberies. But you do have those kind of charismatic leaders, whether it's gangs or something like this, that are able to muster people to follow them, right?
That's correct. You know what? Something I found was he was being groomed. Bob, that was his first name. He was being groomed by the leader of the mother organization that was trying to do things the right way. They had their thoughts, they had their beliefs, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to get people into government and change everything through government with their right wing, super white. I don't know how you can obliterate the Bible like they do by all the white power stuff, but they wanted to do things right. Well, Bob was getting groomed for that position, and he was being moved up. And then he just says, I'm tired of waiting. We're going to go out and do something. So that's how that. And then, he had the leadership skills, the ability, the speaking ability, but he didn't have the huevos at the end. And we'll get there.
Yeah. I have to say, I do know these groups. I read about them years ago because it's such an interesting story. Both the white nationalists that were in the Butler compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho, and the order. But let's show a picture of the real Robert Matthews. I think I got a picture of him. There he is. And he was actually pretty young. I mean, these guys were young. They were in their mostly late 20s and early 30s. And I was losing my hair by the time I was in my 30s, so I am jealous there, But he was a young guy, and these guys. Let's roll the opening scene, I think, because it's important that we see the opening scene. But they were willing to do whatever it could to protect their movement as well. And one of the things they ultimately did, and it did end up it in the movie, it helped point the finger to the FBI on who these guys were. They killed somebody who was talking too much, right? And then when the FBI went to his girlfriend, the guy who was murdered, his girlfriend, and they killed him in the woods, hunting. Let's go hunting, and he kills him in the wood, which is not surprising. And that's hunting up in the Pacific Northwest is typical, right? That happens all the time.
Yeah, sucks to be Walter.
Yeah, and yeah, and this is the other thing. You never know. You get into this. It's kind of like the same with gang members, right? You never know. There are no set of rules that you can understand, right? And if you get into one of the things and you think you're just going to be radical, maybe go play militia and talk a good game, but when it comes down to actually doing stuff, some of these guys don't, and then they become informants and they get killed.
And the thing with Walter was, I don't think he became a foreman. He just had loose lips, and they found out that he has a couple of Budweisers, and he just starts talking a bunch of crap, and that's what got him killed.
Yeah, so I guess that's a recruiting problem.
He forgot that loose lips shouldn't ship. So,
and we have to remember that on the right, one of the typical enemies of the right are the Jews. they're anti-Semitic. They think the Jews control everything, and obviously that's not true. But that is the anti-Semitic trope out there, that they control the media, they control this, they control that, they control 1,000 other things, and it's simply not true. But we do have some very influential people who happen to be Jewish, like George Soros, who does use his money to undermine stuff. The man who never practiced his faith just because he was born a Jew. I think he does nefarious things, but that isn't the case for everybody. Every single thing. Oh my God, it's that. But this is the kind of thing that the right wingers believe, that the Jews control everything, that they don't have a chance. They're being suppressed, and this comes out because one of their victims, is a Jewish guy that they assassinate, and I think Henry Kissinger was on their kill list.
Henry Kissinger was on the list.
And but it wasn't just Jews; it was other people that they didn't like that were on their kill list. But so here it is, and it's interesting. So this guy Alan Berg was one of those. It's like I just think these guys are so stupid. Do you ever hear those shock jocks that you call in and they'll talk to you, and then they just find a way to pick at some wart or some scab and open up this conflict with you. You'll say something and they'll just pick at you just to get conflict going, and that's their shtick. That's how they get an audience. And so I'm just imagine Alan Berg, who probably all he wants is to get conflict on air, because conflict gets listeners get advertising, and that's his gig, that's his shtick. So one of these nutcases, I think it was David Lane, calls up and Alan Berg just he just picks away at this guy and makes him sound stupid on air, right? That's what brought him to their attention, right? And attacking the militia movement and all this. Of course he's going to do that. The militia movement is a very small movement. He's Jewish. They don't like him. He doesn't like them. And he's just playing, he's picking at these guys, making them sound stupid for an audience. And these guys get inflamed by this. To me, this just tells God, stupid people, because why would you target a known name radio guy in Denver because he pissed you off and he's Jewish? That's it, right? So here's exactly. Walter. He got killed here. You see him here. That's right. You're the problem, Walt. Sorry, you talk too much. So. But yeah, what do you think? Just stupid getting, because it's the typical of those shock jocks, right? That they just kind of pick at a wart and get you inflamed, and that's what their audience is all about. That's what their show's all about, right? That's what they do. That's their MO, and that's I've listened to a couple, and I tend to not to listen to that garbage because there's better stuff to listen to. But I've heard them, and it's like, first of all, the people that call in are stupid, but we already crossed that bridge, so. But, I can't say that a lot of these guys we're talking about today are the pillar of the community. They're not the brightest light in the room, I guess. Yeah, they're not rocket scientists, so to speak, right? They may have made it out of high school, but, we're talking Coeur d'Alene. Now, I have my wife's son lives in Coeur d'Alene. And, I call that cop town because I think probably half of my friends live in northern Idaho. Yeah. But one thing this whole incident it took place not too far from Ruby Ridge. Now, Ruby Ridge is roughly 90 miles north up in Naples, which is about just 30 minutes from the border. And I had friends that lived up in Naples. As a matter of fact, there's one guy, ex-Hollywood copper, that Robert Rangel, he still owns property up there. He told me one time, I live right down the street from Ruby Ridge. That's why I bought the house. So, a Latino Indian looking. I know who we're talking about. Yeah. And, yeah, he's a good dude. He's fine. Yes. And I did see that he bought property in the Sun Belt state now that it gets just too cold up there, right? Yeah, exactly. But those last time I was up there was in about 2017. There's still some right-wing weirdos up there, so I wouldn't put them against it. That there's a militia going up there right now, because we already know there's militias in Alabama and Tennessee and the southern states. So a northern militia wouldn't surprise me at all, and even a militia
and some of the other Sun Belt states wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I
Then
think they have them all over. It's just I think some are. I don't. This became a very dangerous group. We'll have to. So militia guys are. What is it? Bring that comment back up. Militia guys were true believers, and they are. Would drop off huge documents of meetings from their constitutional courts. Yes, only the highest political office is the office of the sheriff in the county, right? That's what these guys believe. At my desk, packing pistols and demanding an interview. I had to listen. Well, I'm sorry you had to endure all that. But these, there's so many of these movements. So the Posse Comitatus, remember that guy? I think it was Gordon. I can't remember his last name. He shot, I think, killed two federal marshals. Gordon Call, and former Korean War vet. I forget what state that was in. And then you have Idaho. You have this stuff going on with Order, and Richard Butler's got his compound there in Hayden Lake. Let's show the picture of Hayden Lake. So here's the picture of Hayden Lake. It's whites only. So obviously the Church of Jesus Christ Christian Aryan Nation. So that's a Pastor Richard Butler. So you see during the course of the movie, Robert Matthews visits the compound here, and this is the person that you said is trying to lead. I don't want to say legitimate, but he's trying to use the political system to gain power. So put people in office, get people in Congress, advocate for things that benefit white people. I think, and a lot of this, they wanted their own nation that's only white. I think is that they were basically white separatists. They wanted to be, which is interesting because we have black separatists too. That we want our own nation. We don't want anybody else in there but us, right? And that's kind of, and he was trying to use legitimate purposes to gain power and control, and that was his path. Now, the interesting thing is it's not necessarily identified in the movie, but once these guys they do an armored car robbery and they get like $3 or $4 million, huge amounts of money. They did give a bunch of money to Richard Butler and his compound to help spread the word. So they did spread this money around. It wasn't just used by them. So these guys did benefit, even if they weren't necessarily part of the conspiracy to do the violence. And we do see a scene in here where they said you got to calm it down because this is not good for the overall movement. And let's show that. I got a scene called Funding the Movement, and which is what they were trying to do. They're gathering resources to fight a violent fight to overthrow the government. And here they're doing a robbery. It's interesting. These guys first they tried to rob street dealers, and that didn't go very well for them. And then they switched to banks and armored cars. So we see one of those robberies going on here right now. And they weren't. They tried to rob pornographic houses, so theaters that showed pornography. So they targeted that as well because they don't like the institutions that are degrading society, and they see pornography as degrading society as well, right? So this is part of their philosophy because remember they're a Christian movement that don't believe in the secular or the free love movement, all these things that were going on in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. Right? They probably don't believe in gay marriage. Well, I'm sure they don't believe in gay marriage. They don't believe in abortion. There's a lot of things they don't believe in. And but here they are. They're doing a robbery, and this is all about just gathering money to fund their movement. Now, this is a little different than what we dealt with, Danny. We're dealing with people doing robberies for personal gain.
Right.
These guys are doing robberies for their ideological movement.
You know what got me in this is one of my favorite TV shows is FBI Files.
Yeah.
And, it's something to watch when there's no baseball on. I'm watching the FBI Files on Saturday evening. And this was a case, a bank robbery back in the early 70s. And the robbers went in, and they specifically said, don't give me any money with dye packs in it. Don't give me any money with this and that. And I go, and then the following day, I'm watching this movie, or yesterday, I'm watching this movie again. And these fools go in there and they just start grabbing everything out of the till.
Yep.
And what do they get? About 50 feet out of the bank, and the dye packs start going up.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just like, if you guys would have watched the FBI files, you'd know.
You know, right? If you experienced bank robberies, you would know too. So they're learning as they
Exactly.
go along. I think the other thing that's interesting about this is if you look at the radical leftists coming out of the 60s and 70s, guess what they were doing?
Acid.
Same thing. Same thing. They were doing bank robberies, their armored car robberies, the Weather Underground. Those are the radical leftists who were the Student for Democratic Society, then became violent. The Weather Underground. It was weathermen, and I guess the women in the group didn't like weathermen, so that it had to be the Weather Underground. I've read on this stuff too. There's a lot of drama because they have to be politically correct, so we can't be the weathermen. It's got to be the Weather Underground. But they committed bank robberies too. They partnered with the Black Guerrilla family and the Black Panthers and committed violent action. You saw the Symbionese Liberation Army. They kidnapped Patty Hearst and shot it out with LAPD. I think that was 74-ish, if I remember correctly.
Those are the mid 70s.
Yeah, so this was all going on, and so the same tactics were being used by the right and the left to gather resources to fight the government, right? And so you got far left, far right, yet they come all the way around and meet and use the same tactics to try and meet their goal, and it's violence, taking money from other people, attacking government, blaming the people who have the resources. And so you have to bring this up because if you remember, so Kathy Bodine, she did an armored car robbery, and I think a guard was killed, and I think a police officer was killed, and she was married to, I forget the name of the husband, but their son was Chesa Bodine, who ended up being the DA of San Francisco, hardcore leftist, right?
Yeah.
And he was raised by Bill Ayers, and I can't remember the gal's name, but they were two former members of the Weather Underground who avoided conviction, right? But these, they as one of the commenters said, they are true believers. So we have true believers on the right and left, and ultimately they do believe in violence and overthrowing government, and they both used it. And so here we are. We got these guys doing this bank robbery. But Butler's right later on in the movie, right? I'm surprised that I thought they were going to kill this guy. They didn't. This is a cop who gets overcome, and they disarm him. Rolls up by himself to this bank robbery, and I forget where this was at. If this was Washington State or if they had gone to Idaho.
I'm kind of thinking that was in Spokane.
Spokane. Okay, yeah, all right. Radicals on both sides had real military experience from disgruntled Vietnam vets. Scary times. Yeah, and that's funny. If you get on Twitter, you have all these crazy people who are vets who are hardcore leftists, which surprises me because the left is so nasty towards veterans. But that's what they are, because I get attacked by them all the time. I'm a moderate Republican, but when I post on Twitter, I get all these idiots that attack me, troll me, and how could you be this? You're a traitor and all this stuff. No, I'm not a leftist. I just believe in common sense, and you guys have lost it. But hey, so right and left use violence to get there, right, Danny?
That's correct. These guys, they must have hit like a National Guard armory or somewhere along the line. It doesn't really say in the movie. The weapons could have come from some earlier before that, but they had fully automatic M16s. They had fully automatic MAC-10s, and they had some firepower, and they had the ammunition to back it up. And one of the ways they were financing stuff in the very beginning was they were counterfeiting 510s and 20s, and I presume that's probably how they were buying their cars, because they'd buy their cars from private sellers for $500 or whatever. They'd give a private seller wouldn't know what a counterfeit bill is, so they trade the car for the cash, and then the car's just it's dumped someplace after the crime. So that part was, I think, was planned pretty good.
Yeah, the interesting thing is on this scene here, this part of the scene here, so they've done the bank robbery, and he's come home to his girlfriend/wife, I'm not sure, and she's
concubine. There we go.
She goes along with it. She's like, "Oh wow, yeah, cool. Look at this." And you see that throughout the movie that these they're not necessarily part of the organization, but they're supportive of their men who are in the organization. And
You froze up. There we go.
Yeah, this is they got a short lifespan going here, and she's just excited about this stuff, and but it also shows how young they are, but how stupid and naive they are. And I don't know, we have somebody who's interacted with these people on the right. I got a question for you guys. I feel it was the economy at the time. It was lack of opportunities in the late 70s and early 80s. So that's one of the reasons why I left the Midwest and came to California. I was looking for opportunity. There weren't a lot of opportunities because industry was dying, and manufacturing gets shipped overseas. And instead of, me, I just, okay, let me just grind harder and I'll be okay. People got frustrated. So I think there was a lot of economics behind this stuff. I don't know what you think, Danny. Late 70s, early 80s.
I'm actually going into the mid 70s, probably starting about 73, 74 is when it started really going downhill. And then, in the mid 70s, I was in the Army, so I really don't know what was going on in the outside world. But 78, when I got out, we went into gas lines and we went into, the interest rate then was around 12 or 13%.
Yeah.
I think my brother was paying 12% when he bought his house. That's crazy. And but high interest rates, no cash at all. Gas was at that time would be compared today would be about 6 or 7 bucks a gallon. And so no jobs at all. It just sucked. So why not go out and protest against your government? But what gets me is, why would you want to protest against, declare war on a government that has tanks and bombers? And back then they had some pretty good, the F-4 Phantoms and stuff. They didn't have anything like that now. But why would you want to go to war with them? Because they're going to win.
Yeah, that's coming out of the Carter era was horrible. Gas lines, 44 days, hostages, right? 444-day hostage, yellow ribbons on trees. It sucked. And yeah, but this when you have these things, it stokes these kinds of radical groups. It gives them energy, right?
Right.
When you good economy lifts all boats and people are happy and they get on with living life. Do you think that the movements were glamorized or even used military tactics for brainwashing techniques? Seems like the only thing that can be used for recruitment like that. Yeah, I think people get hooked onto the whole idea of being in a militia, which is, if you look at the Constitution does support militias, just militias regulated by government, local government, not some whack job who like Matthews, right? And but these guys were following a playbook. They were following a playbook called the Turner Diaries. It was a book written by I think Richard Pierce under a pseudonym Andrew McDonald. Let's show the cover here. And it does talk a story about people on the right who form a cell like the Order, and I think they take the name straight out of the book, the Order, and commit violent acts to overturn their government. So this book was out there. It was popular on the far right to overturn government, and this was which is. It's interesting, with media, popular culture or media does influence people, and this gave them the blueprint to operate by. I don't know if you did any research on the Turner Diaries, but that was a big part of this story back in the day, Danny.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I probably heard of it in the past, but never really looked into it. In the movie, they kind of alluded to the fact that the book was written as fiction. Now, I have no clue since I don't know, but you may probably know a little bit more about that as me, but.
Yeah, it was written as fiction, and it was I think designed to inspire, which it did for these guys. But you had kind of the same thing kind of happen with who's the guy that blew up Oklahoma City? McVeigh and Terry McNichols and some others that were hanger-ons in that group. So that was a very small cell of people who were motivated to commit violence and did commit violence based upon their right-wing beliefs. So, and there was some implications, or there were things that were implied that they were also inspired to some degree by the Turner Diaries. And so let's roll the next clip, Fear, because I think this is Walter's girlfriend Bonnie, right? And you have to understand these are remote locations, right? that where this is happening. Spokane is wasn't 40 years ago. It was a decent sized city, but not huge, right? And then you get into the outside of the city, and there's just small communities. Coeur d'Alene was small at the time. It's still relatively small, but it was smaller then. And so the people you deal with, you see every day, right? So and our Husk, our FBI agent, comes to ask questions of Bonnie, where's Walter? Who was he hanging out with? That kind of thing. And of course, he kind of plays kind of the jerk so that the local cop can play the good guy and get information out of him. And she's not going to talk to the FBI agent anyways, right? But she will talk to Walter. So, I mean, he kind of plays good cop, bad cop without telling the local cop he's going to be the good cop in this scenario. But she's reluctant to say anything because she's in fear. And they have to see these guys every day. Walter's missing. They know what happened. I mean, they don't know in detail, but they know that he was likely killed by his friends in this militia. And so fear is a big part of what controls the local community around him, right, Danny? That's it's terrorism. Terrorism is designed to create fear, and the first group they have to control are the ones immediately around them, right?
Right. She had a pretty good idea when they pulled up. The first thing she says is he dead? Of course he is, but she didn't know that. And the friendship here, this is what I got out of it. It goes back into their school days. Bowen, I can't remember his first name, the cop, Coeur d'Alene, or
I think he's deputy. Let's see here.
The deputy from
the sheriff's
Rob
department.
Norris's county. Yeah, Rob Norris's county.
Yeah,
Kootenai County deputy sheriff, and they were all kind of more or less school friends. So that's how he was able to get in, because our cop, he's Native American, and so they're definitely not going to let them into their white racist group. Right. But he was able, just as a friend from way back, childhood friend, is to able to get into her head a little bit. But it kind of threw me off guard. The first thing the FBI guy did was just start getting into her case, and it's like, dude, I know what the hell are you doing? You just lied to a local cop, and that's why we hate you guys. So right. And then it turned out good in the end. But I agree with the reaction from the deputy is just like, he just went off on the FBI guy at the end because it was deserved. Let me know what you're doing, and then instead of this play good cop, bad cop thing, just let me do my job, because I could have got the same information without all the drama. Yeah, and because she was the one. She was whispering. Our actor here is Tye Sheridan, is the name of it. Tye Sheridan. Yeah. And it's Jamie Bowen is the name of the character's name, right? So Jamie Bowen, the police officer here. Yeah, and he's young too. Look at all of these young people are. I go, that was a day when I was that young too, right? But he's going to eventually get it out of her one way or the other. It was unnecessary, but I have to tell you, this is, a lot of this is fictional, so it's dramatization. See, the Turner Diary has been, and I think still is for some, the guidebook since the Brinks heist, Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City, etc. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Although Waco was more, I'm sorry, that one was more of a cult thing than right wing. Yeah, they might have leaned right, but that was cultish stuff. I mean, the guy was sleeping with kids, and it's a whack job. So it may have been the right may have looked at Waco as overreach by the federal government, and that's why they took it up as a cause. But I don't see that guy, David Koresh, was just a whack job cultist. Sexual abuser in my mind. See, for those mentally spinning out of control, I can totally see this as a way for them to feel like they've regained that control to some degree. New therapy ideal. Okay, but yeah, I think these guys, you get these violent groups that are local who are generally, they're the people you grew up with too. That's the interesting thing. Walter grew up with these people. He knew these people. Bonnie knew these people, grew up with them. And now they're to be feared. And so you have this loyalty because you grew up with them, you know them for years, and now you know that they're pretty violent.
and here we are. We got our they get their information from Bonnie. Who was he hanging out with? This is where they first get their lead on who's who and who might have killed Walter. And they go to the area, and of course, this is late 70s, very rural area, and he sees a mound, clearly a burial site, and they check and they find it. And all I could think is, oh, the forensic stuff. God, our homicide would be going crazy. What are you doing? You think it's there? Back off. Call us. But that's that's
Now,
LA
my wife would be
County.
going crazy because I'm digging in the mud wearing khaki pants.
Yes, and it's so and this is Washington, yeah. So everything's going to be muddy and wet, right? Because it rains up there all the time, right? So and green. That's the other thing. It's going to be a lot of wet green stuff here. Except have you ever been to Washington State? If you get past the mountains and get into central Washington, it's all upper desert kind of stuff. It's all high desert kind of stuff. Miles and miles of lentils. I went up to visit University of Washington. We were doing some college tour, and then we went to Washington State. And once you got over the mountains into kind of the plains of Washington, it was all high desert stuff. And I go, oh, this is where they grow all the lentils. It was like miles and miles. It's like going through Kansas or where they grow all the corn, miles and miles of corn. They had lentils until you get to closer to Idaho, and that would be the eastern part of the state, and Pullman, Washington. And it starts to get a little less high desertish kind of stuff. So probably, I guess, west of the mountains, a lot of rain, a lot of wet, this kind of territory. But that's kind of where they were at, right? So the militias were so bad in my town that the cops kept complaining to me that the people kept coming in trying to pay for their tickets in gold. I had, had state Supreme Court marshals protecting my house for a couple of weeks. Didn't even, oh God, you have an interesting story. I should have brought you on for the show here. The High Court had, are you talking about the sovereign citizen there, guys? Is that the group you're talking about? They don't believe anything but the county government. Yeah. So, but these are, you live in these small towns and people go crazy. And let's get one more. Let's do the scene for Hayden Lake, Idaho. Now, I did show the picture of Hayden Lake. It was, obviously Christian nation, Aryan nation stuff. But here's the scene. This is Richard Butler. I thought I had a picture of him, maybe not. Or this guy is playing Richard Butler, and he was kind of the focal point for the movement. He had a compound. I don't know how many acres, but it was a very large compound. They had a church on the compound. And, it's interesting. The latest thing in Coeur d'Alene, where the firemen were shot, one of the theories is the right wingers, the right militia movement shot the police officers because the police officer burned the church on property that was, it implied that it had been owned by Butler and seized by the Southern Poverty Christian Law, Southern Poverty Law Center. They actually sued and seized his property in a lawsuit, took it away from him, and then the firefighters burned it down. I bet you it was one of those. You know how the firefighters would do that. They'll do a controlled burn for training. Yeah. They'll burn buildings down for training. I bet you it got donated to them for that reason. Sovereign citizens, that's correct, Chief. Yeah, that's just the comments you were saying just remind me of their. I don't want to say their values because that implies that there's legitimate. They have legitimate values, but their bend of the militia right is the sovereign citizens, right? So that was they theorized. This is when all the discussion regarding the latest incident, and for the folks out there, what I'm talking about is recently near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I think it's I forget the county up there. It's actually the sheriff is a former LSD lieutenant. That's up there, Robert North.
Kootenai County.
Yeah, and they had a shooting up there, and it was obviously on Twitter, and everybody's, well, it's got to be right wingers. No, it's got to be left wingers. All that happens whenever you have one of these shootings. Everybody wants to paint, and it's just some whack job kid who, I guess he wanted to be a firefighter too, and he didn't like authority, so it didn't appear to be ideologically driven. But they were saying they could have been targeting firemen because firemen burnt the church down on this property that had been owned by Richard Butler. That was what was implied in the reporting. And then you hear all these talking heads. They clearly didn't know the history. CNN, well, what are you talking about? Oh, I never heard about that. It's like get these people off the air. I can probably comment on this stuff better than these idiots. But that was just theory getting thrown out there because that was, to me, that was an underhanded way of implying that this was done by a right winger, which is what goes on all the time these days now. And that's what, like I said, that's what reminded me that we do the show. But here's Richard Butler. He's trying to be the ideological guidepost for the movement on how they're going to handle it, how they're going to retake back their country using the democratic process primarily. Do I think he's involved in underhand stuff? Yeah, I absolutely believe he is. He certainly knew what these guys were doing and what they were capable of, and he obviously never snitched. To my knowledge, he never snitched. And here he is. He's being confronted by the FBI agent, and it's funny. He calls the FBI. Well, you're part of that. What the FBI? Oh, so you're part of that big gang or something like that. He said something like that, insulting the FBI guys. But here's Richard Butler. What'd you think of this scene, Danny?
It was actually kind of good. It surprised me that they would talk to the FBI guys. But he's more the peacekeeper type of thing. So I can understand what Butler did. Now, as a side note, about a month and a half ago, I was flying my blue line flag out in front of my house. And my older brother.
So you're torturing your neighbors, huh?
Yeah. Either that or I'll fly a Christian flag out there. And today I had the American flag out, so I'm still torturing them. So this is probably like 3 months ago, I guess. But my brother, my oldest brother, he stops by the house, and he gets out of his car. He looks at my blue line flag and he goes, "Oh, I see you flying your gang colors today." And I go, "Yep." But no, it really surprised me that Butler would talk to the FBI, but he was cordial with them. And what he's doing is, I kind of equate to what the radical Islamic left is doing right now, aka the Squad, where they're getting in. When you import several million Somalis that hate us into the United States, into Minneapolis, and then get at least one of them to become a citizen and then vote them in to office, and that's what they're doing. They're doing it the way that Butler wanted to do it, and eventually, either way, it's going to fail because the American people hopefully are smart enough not to buy it. But it's even what's going on in New York City right now with their so-called new their Democrat nominee for mayor. You get a guy in there that has no love for the way the American life is doing now, or our way of life, and they want to change it to a different way, which I just don't see going anywhere.
Yeah, the communism, which is interesting. It's so my degree is in political science, and one of the things when you talk about, no matter what the political system is, no matter what, whether it's a monarchy, a democracy based upon capitalism, a dictatorship, communism, a socialism, there's always political elites who will always benefit to some greater degree than anybody else. So when you examine political systems, understanding that there'll always be political elites, what we ought to be seeking is a political system that allows for the greatest amount of fairness as possible. Which is why, if you look at democracies, one of the key parts of democracies that has an economic system based upon capitalism is upward mobility. Now, since we're at the end of our life, closer to the end of our lives there, Dan, we both failed. We didn't go up that economic scale as quickly as others, right? But the economic mobility is, you're capable. If you look at J.D. Vance, I read his book, Hillbilly Elegy. He grew up poor. He grew up in an abusive home. Both of his parents were alcoholics. His mom was a drug addict. He was abused as a child, right, by his mom. Very humble, very desperate circumstances in Ohio town where there was 30% unemployment, a lot of drug use, and he clawed his way out. Went in the military to do it, then went to Ohio State and finished within a few years, and then went on to Yale Law, then became an entrepreneur and became very wealthy doing tech stuff. And now he's the vice president of the United States. That is the difference in this political system in comparison to others, is the upward mobility. You're allowed to be upwardly mobile in this country. And that's why I think democracy is better than most. And democracy, when you look at Western political thought, the collective will of the voters is thought to be wiser than the individual, right? And which is eventually the voters will get there. The people will understand what's right and they'll move forward. It just takes it's just a clumsy process to get there, right? But that's the difference. I mean, if in a monarchy, when you're a king identified by God and only your lineage gets to move forward and people that you tap and say you get to come forward, it's always the elite that move ahead. If you look at communists, it's the people that are part of the party that get to move ahead. I mean, our Mayor Bass was a communist, right? Her goal was to move, and her goal was to move ahead to be part of the political elite, and she's made it there. When you talk about these political systems really, in my mind, always have some elite, and the people, like when we look at Indivisible, who's leading all the protests against Trump, the people running that were elite, and they're only angry that they're not in charge. This has nothing to do with what saving democracy, has nothing to do with that, but you always have people who benefit more than anybody else from certain political systems. And so democracies, I think, based upon a capitalist economic model, is probably the fairest because it allows upward mobility for people who start from the humblest of beginnings. I don't know if you have a comment on that, but that's me preaching. What do you think?
I think you're right. And one thing I believe is our forefathers, when they wrote the Constitution, Declaration, and formed our government, I honestly believed, and I still do, that their intent was to have citizen leadership. Instead of, like, now we have people like Nancy Pelosi, who's been in office. There's people been in office probably longer than I've been alive. And, I'm 2 years under 70. And that's not the way our government was set up. Our government was to get in, do your thing, spend a couple of years there, and then get out and let someone else have a chance to make it better. And we got to get back to that. And the only way we can is term limits. And I kind of say, well, we do have some specialties in government or within the Senate and House where maybe a little bit longer, but we got to figure out this whole term limit thing, get that passed so you don't have, these lifers in office that don't really do anything except take up space.
Well, so we got another comment. When the county tried to do some road work or repair on the land where they weren't wanted, the militia just stole the construction equipment. Well, we see that in the whole, Copland, where they burned the equipment so the government can't build that police facility in Georgia. So the left and the right use the same tactics to impact the ability of government to do what the popularly elected government to do what they've been mandated to do by there's about 6 Duck Dynasty dudes came from the next county commission meeting and said that they'd give it back if the country stayed off their land. It was a quick unanimous vote by the county commissioners. Well, so there's a lot of, I think a lot of this is about who gets what, where, and when. Obviously Christian nationalists, an Aryan nation for themselves. Who do they see as in charge? Themselves. They don't see, and in their vision. Martin, are we at the halfway point? We're ready for our
yes,
break?
yes, but I have questions about this last comment of Stein. And listen, I am not coming from a gotcha position. It's a question to help me understand something. So, he says that okay, the county tried to do some road and bridge repair on land when they weren't wanted, but here says that they say it's their land. So, does that county have legal rights to operate on private lands?
Well, there may be easements. So if there are easements that allow you to go through private land, So yes, the
What is
county
it?
would. An easement is okay. So let's say I own 100 acres, but part of the conditions of me owning that acres is there was an easement that was agreed to probably years before I bought it for people to transit through, right? And
Okay.
so, and based upon that, a county or government can then build a bridge or do what they have to do. The other thing, counties do have the government of intimate domain if it's in the best interest for everybody, that the county can seize property to do what is the best interest. You see this a lot in cities that are in disrepair kind of thing. They'll seize land and they'll redevelop the land. Government will seize the land away from
Even if
owners.
it's
They'll redevelop it, and they'll do that. So there is a mechanism in the law called intimate domain for government to seize private land for what is deemed in the best interest, and that gets abused. And this is one of the things that causes people on the right to get really mad at government, and this is one of those trigger
well, I
points that
can
cause that.
understand that. I
And
can understand that. If somebody just say, "Okay, we're gonna take your land,"
Well,
but
let me put it this way,
that's
Martin.
kind of commie.
Let's say you own 500 acres of land on either side of a river, name the country, whatever, and the natural topography said that would be the best place for a bridge for the entire region. So it would save transportation costs for everybody, make it a lot easier. People can get to the hospital better. So the people in the different towns would be able to, commerce would go better if only they could have a bridge across your 500 acres of land. And you say, no, I don't want to do that.
Well,
And the
it's the
government's saying, yeah, but
land.
this is the best interest of everybody. I'm not saying I'm supporting it. I'm just saying this is the logic. Well, okay, this
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
best.
I understand
This
that.
is the best use for the land. We know that you own it. We tried to buy it. You won't sell it to us. We tried to work out some deal with you. You won't work out with us. So now we're going to seize your land, or we're going to seize a portion of it. We're going to build it.
So mafia tactics.
Oh yeah,
that's
government. This happens all the time with government. Yes, it does
that's
happen
how
all the time
Dodger
with government.
Stadium was built.
That's how Dodger Stadium was built. Yeah, this happens all the time, and yeah, it was totally county owned,
Oh,
controlled. So this was, they actually owned the land, and those guys just didn't want it. Same thing that's going on in Cop City. The government, they own that land. They're building, and I call it Cop City because that's the derogatory name that the left has managed. It's a training facility for police and fire. They own it. It was voted on by popularly elected people in the county and city government in Atlanta, which I might point out to you is primarily Democratic. And it's needed, and that's where they're building it. And the hardcore left just doesn't want it, so they've been burning equipment. They've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They shot a cop. One of them shot a cop. He paid with his life. The radical leftist paid with his life. But this happens on both sides. They decide no matter what government does, they don't want it. In this case that he's talking about, they actually own the land and they were using it for legitimate purposes, but the militias didn't want it, so they destroyed the property. So yeah, that kind of happens all the time too. Does that help?
interesting. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh man.
We're at our 50. We are at the halfway mark. Are you ready with the Martin? Are we ready with the commercial?
Yes, we're ready. 2 minutes.
Right. See you 2 minutes.
Let's go.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We are reviewing the movie The Order, which is based upon real life stuff that happened, hardcore leftist organization that engaged in violence to try and overturn government or take over government. And it seems like we lost our guest, Danny Coon.
Yes, Danny lost connection, is trying to connect again, but okay, here we go.
Here we go. He's back again. I think the militia might be interfering with your connection, Danny. You there? Yeah, I can't. All right. So as Danny works on getting connected here, there's a couple things that occurred in the scene with Hayden Lake, Idaho, and one of them was the economics issue comes up, so Butler's trying to get Matthews to tone it down because he doesn't want it to bring a lot of undue attention to the movement, and Matthews and his mind is the movement's not working fast enough, and basically he brings up the argument that we can't handle. He says we live under these radical economics. So and so as we touched on already, I mean, interest rates were 14% back then because we had high inflation. We had the gas crisis that was going on, and we had a flow of manufacturing out of this country to other countries, certainly in Mexico, that was going on, building up the maquiladoras, which are the twin factories on this side of the border and factories on Mexico side of the border. So we're losing manufacturing, and that had an impact economically on the white working class, and this was blowback. And he acknowledged it. This is, we can't wait because of economics. And that did come out of the scene in Hayden Lake, Idaho scene, and the discussion between Butler and Matthews. Right, Danny?
Right. Excuse me.
So, and that was a reality, as we talked about. So I would have been in my teens at that time in high school. Danny was a little older than me, so he probably is already in the military by now, but the 70s were a difficult time financially. You don't really recognize it as a kid, you're out doing what kids do, but it was tough back then for our parents and everybody else who were trying to make it work. And they did address that. But let's go with the next scene. It is the armored car. So they do one of the armored car robberies, and we see it here that they're reverting to violence. And this is, when you're doing an armored car robbery, keep in mind you're dealing with men who are also armed in the armored cars, and you can see it. They use all these cars. These cars just remind me of the 70s, right? You got all these big boats of a car that kind of sway back. I'm watching all these big cars. Kind of reminded me when we did Walking Tall, the movie Walking Tall as well. We got all these old cars from the 60s and 70s. Of course, they have to have the overweight armored car drivers, right? Can't have the slim guys. And so these guys are armed, and they're taking down other armed people. So this is very dangerous stuff. Now, we saw a very public armored car robbery in LA, and that was the North Hollywood shootout, or I'm sorry, it was bank robbery, in which an armored car was used to actually save people. But we have these people that are willing to use extreme violence to pull off these robberies of armored cars. And this is what you see here. And it's interesting because I'm not sure if this is one where Huss shows up, because they've done a few armored car robberies. But they're using pump shotguns, well armed, and they're intimidating these guys. It looks like these guys would have been safe in the car, the guy, but he gets out. Which I think is against their protocol. I don't think you're supposed to get out of the car. You're just supposed to try and drive away. And that would reduce the incentive of the bank robbers or the armored car robberies, because they pulled away. But very, very violent. You see in movies, this is glamorized to some degree. These big heists. I think when you saw in The Town, it was the Southeast in Boston. It was Ben Affleck played a thug in South Boston where they're doing armored car robberies. We saw it in the Florida shootout. Remember the Florida shootout? They were taken down. There were two guys that were taking down armored cars, and the FBI tried to stop them, and it led to one of the worst disasters. The FBI, more FBI agents killed in that shootout than before. It was really, I think it was Miami, right? And but these are dangerous folks if they're going to be taking down armored cars, because they already know they're dealing with armed guards, and these armed guards have protocols to bring in help. And yet they still do it. Because that's where the money's at, right? That's where allegedly the easier markets are at, and they're willing to put their lives on the line to take these guys down. Speak about the difficulties of armored cars, because I can't remember one that I actually responded to. They did happen in LA when I was working, but none that I responded to. So they're really infrequent because of the likelihood for violence, but they do happen, and when they do happen, it can get ugly quickly, right?
That's right. The last one I remember, I think, happened in one of the malls in Torrance, and that was a long time ago. That was in like the early 2000s. It's funny though. You never think about it. As a young deputy working day shift, probably a couple of times a week, you'd get called in to do a bank run, and you'd take all the bail money that was collected and all the fine money, which amounted to maybe $1,000. And you take it down to the bank where usually it was a Bank of America, where the account was for the sheriff station or for the sheriff's department, and you deposit the money. And you'd always go right at 9 o'clock when they opened up, and you just walk in all fat, dumb, and happy, give them the money and through the business teller's part, and then walk out. And one day I was in there, and an armored car showed up, and you want an anxiety spike. That was an anxiety spike because I knew of all the armored car robberies in the past. And did the bank drop, left, and from that time on, I always did the bank drops later when I had to do them. I just kind of like go get breakfast or something.
Right.
But even today, if I'm around, I do not like being around armored cars, just because of the stigma from all the armored car incidents that have happened through my lifetime. It's just, no, I don't want to be in if there's an armored car parked out in front of the grocery store I'm going into, I'll stay in my car until it leaves, or I'll walk around a wide berth until it leaves, because nothing good happens around an armored car.
Now this scene is shocking to me, because he sees it going down. Now I don't agree with anybody's tactics here. The FBI agent gets out, so this is where I think it's fictionalized. He knows they're heavily armed men doing this bank robbery. I mean, they did a diversion somewhere else, right? And everybody's rolling through the diversion, and this guy knows there's something else coming up, and he hears this going on, and just him and this local cop respond to it. And I mean, he's got the right weapon at least, but he's taking these guys on by themselves. He knows that they're armed, and I thought, to some degree, I thought this character, and I know it's a composite of FBI agents, just had a death wish, right? Because he's taking these guys, and he's thinking his part. So I have a problem with his tactics, because even if his partner came with him, they're still outgunned. And he's out in the open. He's not behind cover. So I was just, oh my God, these crazy people, And I was thinking that maybe this is just the FBI. They're not used to dealing with this. But most FBI agents will, get behind cover, right? I mean, they're smart guys.
Yeah, this was 1973, and he had just gotten finished taking down a big New York mafia family. So
right.
he had balls of steel. He had nothing to fear. I am the guy. I'm protected. He had that macho man attitude.
Well, you got that with this character. You got the sense that his family wasn't with them. They weren't all that excited of coming down and being with him. I think there was some depression going on here, and I think there was some reckless behavior on the character's part. I don't think this is all true. I think this is just kind of makes the character more, gives him more depth, I guess.
Exactly.
And you see this with a lot of cop movies. Oh yeah, the guy's on the edge, full tilt, whatever. And that isn't necessarily the case. This just makes for more interesting cinema. But the other guy doesn't even get out of the car. I didn't see him call for help. I didn't see him do anything. And I'm thinking, what? And I'm thinking, was this fictional too? Or did he just not have the training, or did he not understand? Now I could see where he's looking at him, go, this guy's crazy. Where's the hell is he going? Let's stay here, call for help, get backup rolling. Now that would be good, but he never got out of the car. So I didn't understand it. And they kept working together after this. I don't think.
The other part of this was he didn't get out. They were in, this whole thing happened in Seattle. Well, they blew up the porn shop as a diversion. The bank robbery is in Seattle. You know how far Seattle is from Coeur d'Alene? It's quite a ways.
It's quite a way.
It's an hour airplane ride. That was the crazy part. Why do they? Then all of a sudden they're back in Coeur d'Alene. Come on.
Yeah, well, that's why I think this. Obviously, these are composite characters, but
yeah,
I just, who the hell wrote this? Because this is not believable at all. It is believable that somebody would get off a little half-cocked and go and take these guys on by themselves. That might be believable. They'd probably be a little more tactical about it than Jude Law was. But the guy not getting out of the car, that was, no way.
But then the other thing we talked about, one of the last shows we did was, the FBI and the little 2-inch Erskine FBI, and he pulls out his 2-inch.
Yeah,
at least this guy had a Model 15, which was a little bit better.
I like the fact that he was using the shotgun, because I would be reaching for my shotgun every time, even after we got the 9. After we got the 9s, because if you got double odd buck or you got multiple projectiles rolling down range at your bad guys, to gain an advantage, because they're, particularly these guys, and they had shotguns themselves, they had semi-automatic weapons. But here's the other thing, and it's interesting in this scene, is you will see this with bank robberies, and you will see legitimate, not the, hey, I got the note where they pass the teller, I got a gun, give me your money. That's different, right? But organized bank robberies where they're using weapons, there's multiple people there, they're going to have a layoff guy, right? And they had a layoff,
all the time.
Matthews was hanging back to watch what was happening. And as they emptied the car, so the FBI agent's lucky to be alive because they didn't shoot him. Again, I think this is fictionalized. I don't know if this happened or not. So it's hard to. I know some of the things that did happen in this based upon research, and that I was from years ago just reading about it. I didn't. Maybe they said, well, it doesn't pay for us to shoot this guy, so just let him go, right? And but there's always a layoff guy too. That's why I was like, why is this guy running up there? This is a guy who investigates bank robberies. This is what the FBI does. And you know how thorough they are. They look at, okay, what was around, who was around. They know if this is if you're doing bank robberies like this, organized takeover bank robberies, there's layoff people. They know this. That's another reason why I was like, okay, I don't get this, I would know. What do they tell you in the academy? Had your head on a swivel.
Exactly.
Pay attention, right?
Be flexible and look around.
What was the other thing? Where there's one, there's two. That was when I remember. There's one, there's two. One bad guy, there's two bad guys, right? And
there's always more than one.
There's always more than one. Yeah, and these guys, they investigate bank. That's the. I don't want to say it's the number one thing that the FBI does, but back in the day, it wasn't one of the primary things they did, right? Because
during this time period, it was the number one thing because there was a ration of bank robberies throughout the United States. I talked about the FBI files. One of the FBI files I was watching this last weekend, where with the die packs, that particular one happened during this particular time period, and the dude that was doing those did 54 bank robberies in the Pacific Northwest from Southern California all the way up to Washington. So
I forget it.
So that was their number one job during this whole time period that this happened.
Yeah,
plus all the other radical groups doing their stuff.
The stopwatch crew. I did a show on them, and they were bank robbers. That's all they did, and they were very professional. But this is anyway. So I didn't like any of the tactics used here, and they do talk about counterfeiting also, actually the counterfeiting was so bad that it was easy to spot, and that was another avenue into figuring out who was part of this thing, because these guys were passing the bills and some were getting caught, and they realized it was the same people who's coming from Butler's compound. They were doing the counterfeiting on Butler's compound, so they were, and of course Butler was benefiting financially from it. But yeah, the thing about counterfeiting is I don't want to say it's not a violent crime, right? If you're doing it right, you can make a lot of money and there's no violence involved. So I think the choice to go to violence by these guys is a very it isn't necessarily, instead of just getting better at counterfeiting, right? They wanted to make a statement. So there was two things going on here with these guys. Yes, they wanted money. Yes, they wanted to start. They needed to gather resources, but they also wanted to make a statement with the violence.
Yeah, there is violence every once in a while, and it's been depicted in the movies and television for years of counterfeiters that get violent and everything. I can't think of William Dafoe was in one of the movies I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's To Live and Die in L.A.
Yeah.
That's one on my list to do, but yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. But there is, I cannot remember her name, but there was a female FBI agent that was executed near LAX on a counterfeit operation. And
is that Cross? Susan Cross or something like that?
I can't remember her name. I want to say that sounds familiar, but yeah, that was happening, and I'm sure there's other ones, but that one always sticks in my mind to say counterfeit's not. And I was watching there was a guy in Gardena, who years ago killed some people involved that were actually getting ready to rat him out on a counterfeiting.
Yeah,
I think
I'm not saying that there isn't violence in counterfeiting. I'm just saying that
for the most part, there's not, though. You're right.
Yeah, you're not doing organized takeovers of banks and where the likelihood of violence to occur is greater, right? In fact, if you're really good at counterfeiting, people just don't know they don't know that, so I think turning to violence was as much a statement as getting the money, right? For Matthews, I'm doing something. And I'm charismatic. Look at me. I'm having an impact. I'm having a better impact than Butler, because his slow method isn't working. We need to follow me. And so it was as getting money, but it's also making a statement. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Butler turned a blind eye. He kind of like spoke out of both sides of his mouth. He told the FBI, well, we kicked Bob out of the compound because they're using our presses to do counterfeit money. But in the meantime, he's benefiting from the counterfeit money. So.
Yeah, and I think after the armored car heist where they got $3 million, I think they did get money. So it wasn't. Yeah. He knew what was going on, but he's you see, perfecting counterfeiting was an important advance for the order in the Turner Diaries. Yeah, so I mean, I guess they didn't follow the blueprint right. It should have just perfected counterfeiting and stayed under the radar. To have a greater impact. And so let's show the picture of Alan Berg, and because this is one of the victims where they were clearly identified. Here's our shock jock, and he looks like a shock jock, right? Here's the shock jock, and like I said, this is the guy just kind of gets under your skin on air, and that's his way of making money. And it sounds like he was pretty good at it, because he got under the skin of one of our guys, David Lane, one of the bad guys in this group. And he got himself put on a list. He put himself on a kill list, and they did actually follow through. They do show it. Let's show that scene, Alan Berg. Martine, roll the scene, Alan Berg. Is it there?
Here we go.
So of course, they're doing all their planning in the bars over Budweiser, and then Budweiser, 40 years later, is putting transgender on their bottles, Times they are changing,
So you had a break there 20 minutes ago. You could have filled your water bottle up. That's what I did.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I went to the little boys' room instead. So
Depends.
I obviously, I'm sure there are probably industries that were discussed over bars and napkins that have helped benefited, but also dumb ideas. A lot of dumb ideas have occurred in bars and as well. And obviously, here's the same old: the only real good Jew is a dead Jew. So they're looking. They want to make another mark. They want to kill somebody, and they decided it's going to be Alan Berg. And they end up following home from his studio, and they kill him outside of his house. And this is all true. This did actually happen. And you see him; he's in a VW Bug.
Nice car.
Yeah. And I tell and which is true. He owned a VW Bug back when he was killed. He was killed getting out of his VW Bug. And I have to tell you, when I was doing anti-war protests, every VW van, Peace Love, with a peace sign on it, would show up whenever they had these anti-war protests. These fossils from the 60s would come out and protest against the war. So I saw a lot of cool VW vans that just take the peace symbols off and the roach clip hanging from the rearview mirrors, and clean them up, get the smell out, and they'd be great. But so here he is, he's leaving his office. So this was one part that was actually very accurate with what the order did. They did kill this guy. They staked him out. They surveilled him, and they followed him from work, and they killed him outside of his home. And they killed him with a MAC-10, which I wouldn't say is the best weapon around, but and they shot him multiple times. So Alan Berg, the one of the victims that is well known by the order here, he was on the kill list. They ended up finding other people on the kill list, including Henry Kissinger. I forget who else was on the kill list. Do you remember who was on the kill list that they said in the movie, Danny?
Kissinger name sticks out, and there's a couple other prominent Jewish names, but I just don't remember them, what they were. I know this guy's name was on it. And
it's funny, you never know. You get under somebody's skin and you get put on a kill list, right? And then the fact that he gets under the guy's skin and he happens to also be Jewish, probably just pushed him up higher on the kill list. But yeah, so this is all true stuff. This did happen, and it's tragic. A guy just living his life, making a living, irritating people on the radio. I mean, you could just turn the radio station off, right? Just turn it off.
He's like the modern day people that get triggered on Facebook. You say something on Facebook and everybody gets butthurt and just goes off, and just move on. Just scroll up on. And just turn the knob on the radio. Push the button in your car. Well, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, he's the one of the original trolls, right? So now you got the trolls on Twitter that say stuff and just to get you triggered, right? And but that's what he's doing. That's how he makes his living. And the fact that he couldn't see it, or they did understand, they just didn't like being called out, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, St. Louis Budweiser still has my loyalty. Well, good for you, man. Good for you.
Do they even make Budweiser in St. Louis anymore?
No, I wasn't a long-haired anti-war guy. I was working the anti-war demonstrations as a lieutenant and managing those fools who came down and to protest the war after we went in Afghanistan and Iraq. And an interesting story, the guy that was putting it together for me, I won't say his name, but he told the media that if somebody burned the flag, we're going to take him to jail. And I'm like, you're killing me, because I'm the incident commander here. And obviously the Constitution or the Supreme Court said you can burn the flag in protest. That's a legitimate form of speech. And so then everybody in the media showed up because they wanted to see us arrest somebody who burned the flag, right? And no, yes, that's right. I wasn't, long hair was never something in my background. Now, no hair is more consistent with me. And no, I didn't hang out with hippies because I was too busy working for a living. Hippies, those guys, they came from privileged families. If you look at all those Weather Underground people, they came from middle class, upper middle class families, and they had the privilege to be protesters. And you can find it today. Now, I did a show on a guy named Carlos Arroyo Arenos. His dad was worth a couple $100 billion, and he's leading the protest against Tesla. He acknowledges he's doing. His uncle was Oscar de la Renta, and he said, "Oh, I'm fighting the oligarchy." He's from the oligarchy, And so, no, I wasn't out there protesting with a bunch of long-haired leftists who had every privilege in life, because I had to work my ass off when I got out of high school. I didn't have time for protests. I was too busy working, like most of us, right? Like most of us. No, I was actually working those events for the LA County Sheriff's Department. Hey, let's roll with the next armored car scene. This is the Ukaipa one. And this is the one where they got like $3.5 million. So there's to me they've done their research. They already know that this run generally generates $2 million. For some reason, they think it's going to have more than that in it, and they do their organized takedown of this armored car, which is in remote locations. I don't, for us, we live, we worked in a mostly urban, suburban environment, right? But can you imagine being an armored car driver and you're driving from point A to point B and for 50 miles and there's nothing around? Because that's what it looks like here, right? Up in
And that happens.
Ukiah. It's at Ukiah, California. It's UKIAH, Ukiah, California. So they take this guy down, remote location, and they get a lot of money. This was the big score. And the FBI has already been all over these guys looking for them, but now they got even more motivation. I think it was 3.4 million in motivation to take these guys down. But this is just a continue. Now they're fully funded, and this also made them a big deal in the radical right community because they succeeded. If you remember the Lufthansa heist in New York with the Lucchese family, and I think they got like $16 million. In the Lufthansa, that put them on the map too, with the mobsters. Wow, $16 million in one score. This put these guys on the map for the other radical right wingers as being successful and capable, right? And to be quite frank, they were. I mean, if they do this takedown, organized takedown, and they come away with a few $1 million, which is a big score, particularly back in the late 70s and early 80s, right? So this puts them on the map, right? Right, Danny? Puts them on the map.
That was a heck of a lot of money then. And you're right, it did put them on the map with every radical organization. And what always gets me is everybody thinks that our armored car drivers are expert shooters and trained on protecting their money. They're not. These guys are, for the most part, minimum wage employees, and some of them might be a little show some bravado to protect the money, but most of them, and I would be one of them too, is if a bunch of guys came up to me with guns and said, "Give me your money," you'd take everything you got.
Yeah, I think they're probably told that now, right?
Yeah, I think so now, but back then they did show some bravery, but these guys did the right thing. Just it's not worth my life to protect what's in this van. I'm just going to get out and do what these guys tell me to do.
Henry Hill got $3 million from his part of the heist. But yeah, this was very well organized, at least is what they show in the film. And the fact that they succeeded indicates that they had a good plan, and they got away without anybody being shot. With $3 million, that's a success. It's a big success in the criminal underworld. But God, could you imagine the even smaller white nationalist group? They're heroes now, right?
Yeah,
and they're looked up to. In fact, I can't remember. I was reading about some guys, some radical right wingers today, and they looked at Matthews heroically as a capable leader. I think he's just kind of a narcissistic, he had to know the end was going to be the way it was for him. He was
and even his wife said it that he's not going to come. He's not going to come out alive. She knew how it was going to end. I just don't think they knew it was going to happen so quickly.
Hoult was on the cast of Crusoe, believed that he could effectively portray Matthew's violent tendencies as well as the compassionate, empathetic facade that allowed him to build the following. One of the interesting, I didn't talk about it, we saw it in the scene, is they're all together with their families and their kids.
Yeah.
They got a bunch of kids running around, just like any other barbecue, backyard barbecue, although it's a bunch of radical right wingers who are willing to commit violence. And it's just interesting how whether it's people like David Koretz who in Waco, or Matthews, or any other charismatic leader that get people to ignore the values that they learned growing up and do these incredibly violent things or dangerous things, ignoring the realities of what they're going to, because you think about it, so a lot of these guys went to prison for life. That was it.
You got to look at even how today's Hispanic and black gangs work. The Hispanic gangs, they're making their money selling their dope and doing their things, or the black gangs too, but they're also reinvesting that money into the community, into their neighborhood, with parties and taking care of the kids and getting things for the kids, just to kind of bolster their power in the neighborhood over what, well, we can do this because the government's doing this. El Chapo did that in Mexico. He was providing electricity and water to communities that the government wasn't doing. So I get that part about that's because I've seen it many a times. You drive by a gang pad and they're out there with a big old party and they're taking care of the kids and it's actually a legitimate activity that they're doing. You're going, what the heck is this? These guys are the worst of the worst in this community, and you're hanging out with them and partying with them and having big barbecues and everything. Crazy.
Yep. Well, that's 3.6 million. I said 3.4, so they got 3.6 in this heist. But this puts them on the map, as I said, puts them on the map, makes them icons in the movement forever. They're still looked on favorably by hardcore left or right people who fancy themselves of the same mindset. And the thing is, at this point, they all know who they're dealing with. It's really about just finding where they're at and taking them down. And they do put pressure on his wife, and they do eventually. I think it was his wife who tipped him off, right? There's this island, right? And
Woodby Island. Yeah.
So they're tracing the firearms, they're tracing everything involved, and this is typical police work. And they do end up successfully prosecuting all of them. And Matthews ends up going down in a fight and dies in a fire, which we'll see here in a little bit. But all of them get convicted. All the main guys get convicted and go to prison for long sentence. I think David Lane was the inspirational guy. He did some quote. I didn't write down the quote, but he's looked up to by radical right wingers, the hardcore militia right wingers as well. So a lot of these, they're still looked up to, right? And they do find one guy, I think he's of Spanish descent, meaning European Spanish. It's funny because they interviewed this guy. Who are you? You're mad because your best friend was killed. Remember that one up in Washington? And they asked him, about his surname.
Are you Mexican?
Yeah.
Or that's Mexican, right?
Yeah, I'm European Spanish, right? So Castilian, I guess. So they asked him, and he ends up rolling over on them too because they get him dirty. And which, that's why, as we were talking on the pre-show about, I think every conspiracy, people are going to roll, whether it's or they're going to give up information like Walter does just by blathering, or they're going to roll when they see the consequences coming down. If they can escape, they will give information to get a better sentence. That's why I don't think conspiracies work, right? Somebody's going to talk. Even now, when we look at Biden's thing, people kept it quiet that he was degrading. And as soon as he was out of office and he didn't have power, what happened? They wrote a book to say he was, this conspiracy is not going to, you know what I mean? It's not going to hold.
One of them not only is writing a book, she left the political party.
Yeah. Lots of former heroes of the movement from back in the day, from the Metzgers to the David Dukes. Yeah, but those guys were all marginalized too. I don't think anybody really took those people serious. I forget what Metzger's organization was. David Duke was the Klan, and I think he was elected to state office in Louisiana, and that got a lot of people angry. I guess he was following the Richard Butler path, right? Get elected to
Right.
office.
That game plan.
And they still, what's the guy probably in his 80s, and he still talk about him. Oh, look, he was a Republican. Oh my God, we forget the fact that Richard Byrd, a senator, was also part of the Klan. He was Democrat, and he was friends with Biden and everybody else. I mean, Biden actually, I think he did his eulogy, so and called him a mentor. So I mean, this whole the effort to tag and the Klan were all Democrats back in the day, right? So this is what history is interesting. So after the Civil War, I got time. I got 2 more seconds. But after the Civil War, the Republicans came down south. They called it, Reconstruction and carpetbagging. The blacks all signed up to be Republicans. The first blacks in Congress are first black. They were all Republicans, all of them, because they voted Republicans because the Republicans were the ones who freed them, right?
Right.
And so I don't know why it's like we pick out pieces of history, but that is such a big important part of history. Republicans, Lincoln was one of the founders of the Republican Party, anti-slavery, freed the slaves. The slaves became Republicans. They voted for Republicans, and then they were suppressed by Democrats. And somehow Democrats are the party of anti-slavery. I'm like, it's perplexing to me how that happens, but whatever. So let's roll the next scene. We can trust each other, and I have to remember what's in this scene now. But I hope you guys are enjoying this. So here, they're at the Greyhound. It's another. David Duke was the definition of a bigoted fellow. Yeah,
slightly.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, he absolutely was. And I don't argue with that. It's just the whole. Let's see. These extreme displays of rebellion are common after epiphanies. Yeah. Well, the thing about it is the Republican Party, okay, that guy is an extremist, but the Democrats, they have extremists on their side, and they won't even call them out. They will not call them out. I mean, look at Karen Bass, as we talked about. She was a member of the Communist Party. She ran a group. She was somehow connected to some bombings that occurred. They won't kick her out. They embrace her. They pardoned her. I think I was trying to look up. It said that she pardoned her, but I couldn't find the news report that she was actually pardoned by Clinton. I couldn't find that. I was looking for that. But she definitely came from the hardcore left and radical groups. And she got embraced and accepted into the political environment. And yet she wanted to overturn our government, and bring in a communist government. And I don't think there's anything redeeming about the guy we're just talking about, the KKK guy. But people say, oh, she has legitimate, it's okay to be a communist. But the communists, if they had their way, they would have destroyed America and it's the economic system that we had and the democracy that we have. They don't believe in democracy. They believe in centralized control. So here we got in this scene, we just this is an issue of trust. So Matthews is asking this guy, can we really trust you? And he's pressuring him. And he knows that Martinez, I think it was Martinez, was picked up. Let's see, we got his character name here. He was picked up by the police. And he's pressuring him to see if he'll fold, if he'll and this was interesting because Matthews starts from the standpoint in this, if you look at this, that he did talk. He's he's starting from the standpoint that I believe he did talk. Now I'm going to pressure him. And it's interesting if you understand placing cognitive load on people, there's the whole behavioral. When you're dealing with somebody, if you want to see whether they're being deceptive or not, your goal is you ask them a series of questions, and then you talk to them backwards. But your goal is to put load on them to make them feel stressed out, and then to see how they react. And as I was watching the scene, because we trained our folks on how to do this when they're dealing with suspicious persons on the transit system, this is exactly what he's he's putting that load on him. Well, what did you say? Did they say anything about Berg? What did you say? He's putting that load on him, and he's watching closely how he reacts. And it just reminded me. So this guy's a smart guy. I think he's dumb in that he's going down the wrong path and getting whatever political change that he wants. But he knows how to put pressure on this guy, and this guy is saying, "Oh no, I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything." That kind of thing. And but this is what happens in these groups. They don't trust each other. Eventually, they don't trust each other. See, I have to get the chief to the land of cotton for a barbecue. Okay. I love barbecue. I can't restrain myself when you get a good barbecue with St. Louis or no matter where, no matter. I've had St. Louis ribs. I don't know if that's south enough for you. That's kind of a border state, right? But yeah. So and this happens in these organizations. They don't trust each other, right? And
Exactly.
that's
and
that's
go back. Matthews, like I said before, he was groomed already, so he knew these tactics.
right. Yeah, we lost your sound there, dude. I think your mic's off. There you go.
He learned these tactics because he was groomed by Butler and the upper echelon of the original movement. So, and it's basically everyday cop movie, either street cops, detectives. We all use the same basic tactics anyway. So it was easy for him to put them on. I think his name was Torres. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, if you can't get 5 cops together to agree on where to eat, how are you going to get 5 bad guys to trust each other?
Right. And that's what happens with gangsters, though. If you're in jail and you get released quickly, they think you talked. They think you rolled. These kind of things happen in these criminal organizations, and they're criminals, right?
Know a lot of dope dealers that got whacked after they got. We'd go out and we'd hook up a dope dealer, and he agreed to work with us, so we'd keep him in jail for like a day, and then we'd let him out. And bad things happen to him sometimes. It's out of our control.
And they don't even necessarily have to be working with you. The bad guys just need to believe that he might be, and it's better just to tie up loose ends. And you see that with the La Cosa Nostra. You see a lot of the movies. They do that too. They just, let's tie up those loose ends anyways. Let's not take a chance. He might be snitching, but why? Particularly if they're lower level folks, right? They're not part of the core leadership.
Yeah, isn't it the mafia that wrote the book on how to deal with these type of things that we're dealing with now, or how to cause the havoc that we're dealing with now, I should say.
Yeah, make sure you send your best friend. If your best friend's inviting you out to the woods there, he's probably going to kill you, right? So it's like, they won't send a bad guy that you don't know. They'll send your best friend. It'll be your best friend. The movie Goodfellas, I think Henry Hill says it'll be your best friend that sets you up.
The Goodfellas, the Godfather, all 3 of the
yeah, all of it, right?
It's going to be your brother-in-law in the back seat that carries you.
Yes, right. Anyways, I thought this was good. He doesn't trust anybody. He's putting this cognitive load on them to see if they'll flip. And our guys know this is them, and he does try. I think he tries to call it in. They see Matthews. He's going to try and take him down. And unfortunately, this is when our local cop gets killed. And I thought this was pretty. I don't know if this happened because I think this is fictionalized, but he's hit and he's still running and he's still in the fight. I thought that part was realistic, right? And this is before a widespread use of vests. Because a round's it's not like in other Hollywood where a round is going to take you down right away. If you're hit with, I want to say, relatively low caliber round, or even a high, if the bullet goes through you and out the back, there's still it dissipates the energy, and you can still stay in the fight. And so here we see Matthews. He gets confronted by the FBI agent, and he takes off running. And our young guy, of course, the younger guy catches up with him sooner, right? so the young guy, now he's in the fight. He's not going to sit in the car like he did last time, and he chases him, and Matthews shoots at him. He shoots back, but he's taken looks like 1 to the 10 ring. Now, this, to my knowledge, this is not true. I've not seen any story where the order killed any police officers. I think if they had a good, they would have, but I don't. think that they did. So I think this is fictionalized. But it's sad, So here we go again. Two guys taking on other people that are shooting. Here's Matthews running, right? Started making mint juleps. I've had mint juleps before. I made them here at home. Mint juleps and basil lime coolers. In fact, I was thinking about doing a party where I just do all these herbal based drinks. Yeah. You can use parsley, so parsley gin juleps as well. But or maybe Matthews was like 24 at the time. He robbed various banks. Maybe he was younger. I didn't remember what his age was, but you can see in the movie he's young, and you can see the pictures. He died pretty young, right? So after this chase scene, here we go. Here's the shooting. Jamie's he's fighting back. So we get these, and this is the other thing too, Danny. So this was the day and age of everybody's got a 6-shooter, right? That's when we started. Except the bad guys, right? Except the bad guys. They might have some 45s or whatnot. And so you got to count your rounds, 6 rounds, and then you got to reload. He might have had dump pouches. I don't want to say who it was, but I went back east for a graduation from a police academy, and I had been working, was probably 87, 88 before and this relative had graduated from a police academy, and they were still using dump pouches, and I was dumbfounded. What? Here we're talking about transitioning to autoloaders, and we had been using speed loaders the whole time I worked, and these guys still had dump pouches. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. This is probably what these guys had, because
I think on one of the cops they had. I noticed it last night. I'm looking at real close at the pictures right now. It looked like one of them at least had dump pouches on it, and I want to say it was the Kootenai County guy, Jamie.
Yeah. Dump pouches. You flip the pouch over, and the bullets end up in your hand loosely, right? So if you're going to reload, you put your cylinder out. You have to dump your brass, and then you got to load it individually, one at a time. And that is, in a gunfight, that's pretty slow. So here he is. He's taking his round to the chest. He's still running though. He's still shooting, but he's dead on his. He's probably already dying, and he collapses. And this is one of the sadder parts of this thing, because now here our Husk goes after him. He continues running, but our local guy, you can see, he's taking his round, and he's now out of the fight. He's going to go down. So they had to do this in an alley because you got to get this all framed right. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So when you look at these movies, it's like, we know these shootings are pretty dynamic. They don't end up this linear, right? But you had to do it that way so you can see the fight continuing, the shootout continuing, and the one partner going down. So down the alley probably worked out pretty good for the linear shot.
Yeah, but you were talking about the shootings portion of it. These guys, at least they had 4 inches, but the bad guys, I don't remember the gun he had, but if he was shooting with a MAC-10, a single-shot MAC-10, it would probably be a 9mm round and a round ball 9mm round. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the reason cops carry
hollow points,
jacketed hollow points, is because it stays inside the body. Typically, round ball rounds go through you, and that's probably what happened with Jamie when he got shot. Even though, there are people that have been standing after getting shot with a hollow point too. It just takes them the time to bleed out. But that's what happened to Jamie. He was probably shot. It could have been a through and through. It could have stayed in, but it was a non-fatal round. If he would have got shot in the heart, he probably would have bled out in a couple of seconds. But this was down in the sternum and a couple of the other shots, stomach shots. He's just got to bleed out. It's going to take a while. Probably about halfway through, when he's sitting there shooting, he knew he was going to die, and he goes, "The hell with it," and just keep on going. To the point at the end, you could hear him shooting as the FBI guy was running past him. The FBI guy was running past him.
Husk,
you could hear the click, 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 and the FBI guy's shooting. So
he
knew he was out. He knew he was going to die. He was just going to do whatever he could to take out the threat. He didn't even bother to. He didn't bother to reload. Probably didn't have the energy to do it because all he could do is sit there and pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's actually, when you look at a lot of cops killed in line, a lot of them are young cops killed in line. But the younger guys are working nights, they're working early mornings. So, that's,
usually
as you're getting older, you're a detective, and maybe you got some seniority, and So a lot of the guys get killed are young. Well, let's roll in the next scene because it's a long scene, and this is the takedown at the island. So the FBI, now that they got somebody killed, one of their a police officer killed, they're putting the pressure. They get the pressure on the wife, and and here's the thing: the wife knows what's going on, and so she can be culpable, she can be prosecuted, and she's got kids. They kind of put the pressure on her, and she rolls over. He won't be taken alive, but there's a safe house on this island in Washington State that he's connected with. Go ahead.
The wife, she could not bear children.
Oh, okay.
So Matthews had his squeeze have a baby. So the wife had a grudge to pitch, and you could see it throughout the movie. Goes, is that your baby? She said to him at one point during the movie. Well, so it probably didn't have to put too much pressure on her to sit there and say, you know what, this guy's been screwing around on me, and he's having other kids by other women. Yeah.
Which is not surprising. These guys that are charismatic like this, narcissistic, I'm all for family values. Well, if my wife can't have babies, I'm going to have family with somebody else. I'll stay married because that's what I'm,
And that's just, it was probably a little bit of moderate pressure they had to put on her to get her to roll over. But you knew she was going to roll over once she found out that he got this other broad pregnant by, and she was pissed about it.
Well, these guys know that the FBI's onto them based upon the last scene. But, in reality, after the $3.6 million theft of the armored car, they knew the FBI would be all over them. They knew they were going to be targeted. They knew they moved to the top of the list of organizations that the FBI wants to take down. They knew what was coming. He had a plan. He had a place where they can go hide and get out of circulation. And of course, the FBI didn't know that at the time, didn't know where they were at, and the wife rolled over on them. But it was probably, since the police shooting was fictional, it's the best I could put together. This probably happened where they got out of circulation after the armored car robbery. They knew they had to lay on the lamb. They had to get, lay on the lamb, get on the lamb,
go on the lamb,
go on the lamb, and hide and let this blow over and let other priorities. Let the FBI be taken over by other priorities other than this. And so I think that's probably what happened, although I couldn't find any reference into any historical documents. But so they go to their island, and it looks like it's 3 or 4 of them, including Matthews. And they're just laying low. And of course, they end up seeing the FBI figure out where they're at, and they come with an army, as they should. Here's they're getting ready, and you can see it's kind of like a farm or something like that where there's a lot of equipment laying around, and a lot of them are wisely getting behind cover, the FBI guys, and some of the guys see them there, and they try to take off, and they end up getting caught. Those are the ones that get prosecuted. But Matthews decides to fight it out, and I want to say, when I looked this up, he fired off like 1,000 rounds. It was a huge amount of rounds that he fired off. When I looked this particular shooting up, because the confrontation at this island, and it says that the FBI just set the place on fire. Now I didn't necessarily believe that. I believe that was fictional. I think, back in the day we had smoke projectiles that burned hot. That was kind of the primary thing that you had. And when you shot those projectiles in, sometimes they could ignite the house. You'd hope people would come out beforehand, and if they didn't, if they were still a threat, they could ignite the house, and there was no real way of putting the fire out once it's ignited if the person's still shooting at you. So I don't necessarily believe that the FBI knowingly lit the place on fire. What I believe is, back in the day, because we had that on the sheriff's department, right? We had what are they called? The flight right rockets and stuff like that. That they burned hot. Remember that when you were originally going, that stuff burned hot, and the danger was that it could burst up down, right?
But even in recent times, you go back to LAPD when they burnt down the SLA house. That was caused by tear gas and smoke bombs.
Right.
You move up. I cannot pronounce his last name, but a young deputy who was killed in the line of duty while the marshals were doing a service up in U.S. Marshals were doing a search warrant up in Santa Clarita. that house burnt down due to tear gas and smoke bombs. And then the murder of another young deputy up in the Palmdale area, Lancaster Palmdale area, his SEB inundated his place where he was at with gas, and it burned down. So that happens. I've never heard. I mean, firemen don't even burn things by indiscriminately throwing a flare someplace. So
yeah. So
that was straight drama out of all of the different things that have happened where things burn down. And it's just someone got it
that's
wrong.
why I don't believe let's burn them down. Right? I don't think that happened. I think they put the smoke bombs in there because they want to get him. They want to get the money. They want to deconstruct the organization. It isn't just about him. It's about the organization and taking apart the organization. And so throwing smoke bombs in there at the time, they all burned hot. Now they have smoke bombs now that don't burn quite as hot, right? But they can still ignite. So they try to work on that. But yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. Is I can't pronounce the name of the guy up in Santa Cruz, but it was the Sorensen murder that I think you're talking about.
Yeah, Sorensen was in, and the first guy his first name's Jake. I just can't. I call him alphabet.
Jake Karigian. So here's the thing about like the Sorensen one. That guy was some meth hype guy. He had tunnels, all kinds of stuff. He had ways to avoid being captured. Right. That's my understanding on that particular case. I did interview somebody that did that case, and so when they're throwing smoke bombs in there, I think they're getting to come out of that facility, but he had subterranean passageways that he was dealing with. Same thing with SLA. They had gone under the house, and so when they threw the smoke bombs in there to avoid that, and so they didn't come out. So there was no real way of mitigating the smoke bombs once it caught fire because one, they were still shooting and they were in a place where they couldn't be impacted necessarily by the tear gas and the smoke grenades.
Back in those days, that was a house that was probably built in the 30s or 40s, so they were able to get down underneath them because it was a raised foundation back then. They had
yeah. So, but anyways, he fires like 1,000 rounds at these guys, and they shoot the tear gas in, hoping to come out. Now, the one fictional part of this I saw was Huss going into the place, making eye contact with Matthew and say, "Come on out, man. It's all over with." Of course, I don't believe that happened at all. I think that's all just cinema, because he goes in there, smoke bombs, and he doesn't have a mask on. He doesn't have anything. He's not even coughing. So that ain't going to happen with CS gas. You're going to be, snot is going to be coming out of your mouth and your nose, and no way.
That's the funny part, and you see this in all kinds of movies that depict firefighters because they're burning natural gas here to create the fire. But the way fire burns, the heat comes from the top, obviously, and works its way down. At about waist level, the heat is anywhere between 1,600 to 2,200 degrees, which is definitely enough to kill you. You're not going to stand up in there and take a breath of air.
No.
And these guys are standing there faced off with each other. That's just so preposterous.
It made for good
in every
movie
fire
making.
movie I see.
Well, you had to go through the smokehouse, right, when you went to the academy, and so.
Fortunately, no, but I.
Oh yeah, no, we had to do
some arson classes and other stuff.
The tear gas house, when you had to go to the
tear gas house. Oh yeah.
Oh man, if they threw CS in there, which they probably did, because that was the go-to device for choice on something like this, man, you're coming out. Snot, your eyes are watering, snot's coming out of your nose and mouth, and you ain't standing up saying, "Hey, dude, come on," it's all over with. No way, it's not happening. So that was
when I was in the Army. One DI was there without a mask on, telling people to go in and out, but they were switching out every 5 minutes or every couple of minutes.
That's because they wanted to look tough.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we'd go play Army or go camping with the Army, they'd gas us every once in a while. And it's like, you're getting gas. Oh crap! Now you got to find your gas mask. It just sucks.
All right, we are at the end of our show, folks. We went a little over, but I had a lot of history to talk about in relationship to the Order. It was a good movie, a lot of fictional stuff related to it, but hey, take some time to look up the Order and look up what was going on with this group, because they were crazy right-wingers. But keep in mind, look at what is going on the left as well. We have some crazy leftists out there that are using violence. And so they're cut from the same cloth. They just have different ideological bents. These people are dangerous. They need to be dealt with. Danny, thank you for joining me here again on Morning Coffee with the Chief, going over the movie The Order.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it very much, and always a pleasure to be your guest.
All right, stick around. Quick debrief. Martine, we are at the end of our show. You can take it away.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.